PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan and the Tour's player members, player directors, and player advisory council members have announced a new agreement to ensure that the Tour lives up to its mission of being a player-driven organization, quote, for the players, by the players, end quote. As part of the new transparency and governance measures in the agreement, Tiger Woods has agreed to join the Tour Policy Board as a sixth player director. The Tour's new board will include 6 player directors, 5 independent directors, and the PGA of America director. This quote from Tiger Woods: "I am honored to represent the players of the PGA Tour. This is a critical point for the Tour, and the players will do their best to make certain that any changes that are made in Tour operations are in the best interest of all Tour stakeholders, including fans, sponsors, and players." The players thank Commissioner Monahan for agreeing to address our concerns, and we look forward to being at the table with him to make the right decisions for the future of the game that we all love. He has my confidence moving forward with these changes.
And PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan also released a statement saying Tiger's voice and leadership throughout his career have contributed immeasurably to the success of the PGA Tour, and to apply both to our governance and go-forward plan at this crucial time is even more welcomed and impactful. I'm committed to taking the necessary steps to restore any lost trust or confidence that occurred as a result of the surprise announcement of our framework agreement. My job in the negotiations, in partnership with our player directors, PAC and the broader membership, is to advocate for what is best for PGA Tour members today and in the future. Any agreement we reach must be shaped by our members' input and approval earned through our player directors. And with more on the news of the day, we're going to welcome in Todd Lewis from the Wyndham Championship. Todd, what more can you tell us about the reaction to this?
Well, I can tell you that news of this has been percolating for the last couple of days and finally became a reality today. And talking to members of the Player Advisory Council and talking to members of the PGA Tour Policy Board, having Tiger on the PGA Tour Policy Board was initiated by Tiger Woods. Woods, like other players on the PGA Tour, was upset in regards to the announcement in June that the PGA Tour has a framework agreement with the PIF from Saudi Arabia in trying to work out a deal so the two could work together. Mainly he was upset, and other players have been, because the PGA Tour Policy Board members, 2 of them specifically, along with Jay Monahan, and those policy board members are independent directors, not players, made the decision without the players having any voice. Now, Tiger reached out to the PGA Tour saying players must have a voice in big decisions like this, and thus he worked it out with the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan to be on the PGA Tour Policy Board. 2 days ago, Tiger called a meeting with the PAC, the Player Advisory Council, and the PGA Tour Policy Board members to announce he is going to be a part of the Policy Board. And of course, it was a unanimous thumbs up by all of those members. This, according to the players that we talked to today, is a positive move for the membership of the PGA Tour.
It means a lot. I think it's very clear where the game of golf is and where it's headed. It's important to him. You know, I think it's whether he's been vocal about it or not. I think he has some, but you know, when Arnold and Jack kind of passed the torch to him, you know, that's not something that he takes lightly, and it's very important to have the betterment of the entire membership and the game of golf and the PGA Tour, to have that thought first and think of the best possibilities. And yeah, I don't think there's anybody else I'd want speaking on my behalf and the rest of the guys.
Does this maybe solidify or maybe bridge the gap, I should say, between some players and the tour that may have been a wide, chasm a few months ago?
I don't know. I mean, you're never going to make everybody happy. That's something that I've definitely learned as I've maybe become a little bit more involved, or I don't know, vocal's the right word, but just kind of being in the know a little bit more. You're just never going to please everybody. But it's just, unfortunately, it's about the majority and what's best for the entire PGA Tour. And yeah, I think that's. I would like to hope and think that the membership and everybody understands that is what Tiger has in mind, especially with him, clearly not playing as much, and who knows what his future holds. But I mean, we got to keep him busy somehow. He can't just sit on the couch and do nothing. So I know he'll be taking it very seriously, like he does everything else.
Yeah, I think that was a bold and really impressive commitment on his part to want to be a part of the governance and to ask for and demand transparency of what's been happening, but also what's going to happen. Clearly he wants to be involved and be a part of this, which I think is awesome. Clearly he's the face of our game for the last 20 years, and for him to still be this involved and still wanting to represent us and our fans and our sponsors, and mostly the future generations of the game, I think is very honorable.
It also gives players 6 votes on the board compared to 5 independents, so the players have the majority on the board. How important is that?
When I was on the board in 17, 18, 19, we kind of trusted the independent directors with the important business decisions, and they trusted us with the important golf decisions. It was a nice symbiotic relationship, but now clearly there's been some unique circumstances, I would say. So as far as how the voting exactly goes, as far as what percentage needs to be, is it just majority, does it have to be 100%? I'm not exactly sure if it's different on different types of decision making, but it doesn't hurt to have Tiger on your side, that's for sure.
The agreement and transparency, I think the tour's been working hard for a few years on transparency, obviously. Through the framework agreement, it wasn't ideal, but I think it's great that our top players want to be part of the decision making and want to be part of the board, and that's the direction we're going. Tiger Woods, Adam Scott coming in next year, Patrick Cantley, Jordan Spieth prior. It's great to see our top players, our future players of the PGA Tour, want to be part of the decision making.
Was this Tiger's idea to be a part of the board?
As far as I know, it was all Tiger, and which is, I don't know if we would have asked him if he would have wanted to, but I think since it was his idea, I think it was a great idea.
What does it mean having his voice on that board?
He's the most powerful voice in the game of golf, I think. You could argue Jay's is, but if you don't do something that Tiger wants, you talk about the previous ambassadors, which were obviously, you got the Arnold Palmers, Jack Nicklaus's, and that would say paved the path for Tiger Woods. But Tiger Woods has done more for golf than arguably anybody, and to have him sit in those meetings now, I think is very powerful, and I think his voice will be listened to.
After the framework agreement was announced, a lot of players openly and vocally said that they felt betrayed and they didn't trust the tour and Jay Monahan. Does this bridge the gap? It's
a start. It's definitely a start. I think this is our best move we've made in the last few months for the PGA Tour, and I think it's on the back of Tiger coming up with it, and I think he wants to be part of the PGA Tour going forward, which is unbelievable.
Now, ever since returning from his leave of absence, PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan, his mission statement has been trying to rebuild the trust of the players who, like I said earlier, felt betrayed, felt like that Jay has to earn that trust back after making that announcement, this framework agreement, without any player having any voice in that situation. Asked Charlie Hoffman, was this a good move by Jay? And Charlie said he really had no choice. Well, Tiger Woods has never been a part of the government of the PGA Tour. He's never been a member of the Player Advisory Council. Now he has a seat at the player board, and what a voice it is, the biggest in the game, and it is very impactful. Guys?
Todd Lewis reporting from Sedgefield. Much more from T-Lou in just a little bit. There have been some seismic days in this game over the last couple of years. How big is the news today?
It's big, but not for the reasons that might obviously appear. Obviously, Tiger joining the board is going to be the attention getter. But that fact shouldn't distract from just how significant the ransom demand Jay Monahan has paid to keep his job is today. And that's essentially what this comes down to here. And Jay admitted it in his own statement that there had been an erosion of trust and confidence, and these changes are designed to change that. But it's somewhat symbolic that the players now have 6 votes on the board versus 5, because historically there's been a convention that the non-player directors don't actually vote against something that the players are not going to vote for themselves. But there are aspects of this that are not symbolic at all. The fact that the tour has now conceded that nothing will be approved, no major decision in the future of the tour will be taken without the express approval of the player directors is significant. But also Colin Neville, who was announced last week, private equity guy here in New York, who was brought in by Tiger and Rory last summer as part of that Delaware meeting to reshape the tour for this threat posed by LIV, he has the support and trust of players earned back then. He was announced by Jay last week as being a player advisor as they work through these negotiations with the Saudis. And today's announcement is that Colin Neville will have access to any document and information he wants as it relates to those negotiations. So essentially the players can smother at birth anything they don't like in these negotiations. That it's not going to get to the point where what is put forward for a player vote is something that the players aren't actually in favour of as well. So they are now controlling the ship of state in a lot of ways. And it does really speak to the degree of anger and resentment that existed about the secrecy that this process was handled in. I mean, the press release lists 41 players as co-signing on this move by Tiger and Jay. That goes way beyond the membership of the pack. It goes way beyond the membership of the board. It speaks to the depth of the anger. And that's essentially what Jay Monahan was faced with, that you're no longer making unilateral decisions for this organisation. This is the player uprising.
Yeah, and Tiger Woods has been conspicuously absent, I believe, in these discussions, at least publicly. We haven't heard his voice, save for the 150th Open when he was very passionate in the press conference at St. Andrews about what traditional golf means to him, earning it in the dirt. What does it mean, this evolution of Tiger, that maybe at this point in his career, at the age of 47, his most powerful moves will be with his voice and not with 14 clubs anymore?
Yeah, it does suggest that, as silent as he has been, that Tiger feels very strongly about this, and which is fair enough, because he was also wheeled out by the tour over the last year or two to defend it against Liv, and then not looped in whenever these decisions were being made in early June for this framework agreement. And the tour may well calculate that it's better to have Tiger in the tent rather than outside
for sure
the tent and criticising. But, you know, there's the old saying, you don't take a tiger as a pet, because they do bite. And Tiger clearly has an opinion that he has not stated in public on this arrangement, not just on the governance of the tour. That's clear what his opinion is on that he doesn't think it's very good, he doesn't think it's very transparent. What is his position on the actual agreement itself and the idea of going into business with the Saudis? Because that also has an influence on how things like this work out. And ultimately what we're seeing here is the executive level of the PGA Tour, which, you know, really started to become the sole decision-making body way back in the Tim Finchem era. It's been more and more top-heavy in terms of decision-making over the years. Today, it has been defenestrated by the players. The players have told the commissioner of the PGA Tour and his entire team that the decisions that are being made now are going to be made by us. And in fairness, it ought to be pointed out that the reason we are in this position is because Jay and two members of the policy board in Ed Hurley and Jimmy Dunn made decisions that clearly they felt were in the interests of the PGA Tour, but they did so without consulting the players, and the players are biting back.
Yeah, and it sounds like the bonds of trust that have been broken are maybe slowly starting to be put back together. Do you think with today's news we're any closer now to knowing what this framework agreement might look like in real time, in action? Are we closer to a merge, to a marriage, or does this change nothing as far as you're concerned in terms of where we sit and what 2024 will even look like?
It doesn't change much in terms of the timeline, because it was very clear from Jay Monahan's memo to players last week that he was buying time, that by telling them, you know, there is the promise of A, B, and C, but we're not actually there. It's a time-intensive process. And I think this just reinforces this idea that the players are taking control of the process. They're not taking control of the negotiations. Other people are going to do that, but they're not going to be blindsided by what's coming out of that, because that process is still months away from actually getting anywhere. I don't think it changes the timeline, but there are now 6 player votes that have to be won over for the actual framework agreement to pass, and that could be a huge uphill struggle for Jay Monahan to get there.
Yeah, maybe not a change in the timeline, but at least a change in the tenor. This was called a player-run organization, maybe in name only, now seemingly a player-run organization indeed as well.